want to start with a story, a la Seth Godin, from when I was 12 years old. My Uncle Ed gave me a beautiful blue sweater, at least I thought it was beautiful, and it had fuzzy zebras walking across the stomach, and Mount Kilimanjaro and Mount Meru kind of right across the chest that were also fuzzy. And I wore it whenever I could, thinking it was the most fabulous thing I owned. Until one day in 9th grade, when I was standing with a number of the football players, and my body had clearly changed, and Matt Mussolino, who was undeniably my nemesis in high school, said in a booming voice that we no longer had to go far away to go on ski trips, but we could all ski on Mount Novogratz. And I was so humiliated and mortified that I immediately ran home to my mother and chastised her for ever letting me wear the hideous sweater. We drove to the Goodwill, and we threw the sweater away somewhat ceremoniously, my idea being that I would never have to think about this sweater nor see it ever again. Fast forward, 11 years later, I'm a 25-year-old kid working in Kigali, Rwanda, jogging through the steep slopes, when I see 10 feet in front of me a little boy, 11 years old, running toward me wearing my sweater. And I'm thinking, no, this is not possible. But so curious, I run up to the child, of course scaring the living bejesus out of him, grab him by the collar, turn it over, and there is my name written on the collar of this sweater. I tell that story because it has served and continues to serve as metaphor to me about the level of connectedness that we all have on this earth. We so often don't realize what our action and our inaction does to people we think we will never see and never know. I also tell it because it tells a larger contextual story of what aid is and can be, that this traveled into the Goodwill in Virginia and moved its way into the larger industry, which at that point was giving millions of tons of secondhand clothing to Africa and Asia, which was a very good thing, providing low-cost clothing. And at the same time, certainly in Rwanda, it destroyed the local retailing industry. Not to say that it shouldn't have, but that we have to get better at answering the questions that need to be considered when we think about consequences and responses. So I'm going to stick in Rwanda circa 1985, 1986, where I was doing two things. I had started a bakery with 20 unwed mothers. We called the Bad News Bears, and our notion was we were going to corner the snack food business in Kigali, which was not hard because there were no snacks before us. And because we had a good business model, we actually did it. And I watched these women transform on a micro level. But at the same time, I started a microfinance bank. And tomorrow, Iqbal Kadir is going to talk about Grameen, which is the grandfather of all microfinance banks, which now is a worldwide movement. You talk about a meme. But then, it was quite new, especially in an economy that was moving from barter into trade. We got a lot of things right. We focused on a business model. We insisted on skin in the game. The women made their own decisions at the end of the day as to how they would use this access to credit to build their little businesses, earn more income so they could take care of their families better. What we didn't understand, what was happening all around us, with the confluence of fear, ethnic strife, and certainly an aid game, if you will, that was playing into this invisible but certainly palpable movement inside Rwanda, that at that time 30% of the budget was all foreign aid. The genocide happened in 1994, 7 years after these women all worked together to build this dream. And the good news was that the institution, the banking institution, lasted. In fact, it became the largest rehabilitation lender in the country. The bakery was completely wiped out. But the lessons for me were that accountability counts. You've got to build things with people on the ground, using business models where, as Stephen Levitt would say, the incentives matter. Understand, however complex we may be, incentives matter. So when Chris raised to me how wonderful everything that was happening in the world, that we were seeing a shift in zeitgeist. On the one hand, I absolutely agree with him. And I was so thrilled to see what happened with the G8, that the world, because of people like Tony Blair and Bono and Bob Geldof, the world is talking about global poverty. The world is talking about Africa in ways I have never seen in my life. It's thrilling. And at the same time, what keeps me up at night is a fear that we'll look at the victories of the G8, $50 billion in increased aid to Africa, $40 billion in reduced debt, as the victory. as more than chapter 1, as our moral absolution. And in fact, what we need to do is see that as chapter 1, celebrate it, close it, and recognize that we need a chapter 2 that is all about execution, all about the how-to. And if you remember one thing from what I want to talk about today, it's that the only way to end poverty, to make it history, is to build viable systems on the ground that deliver critical and affordable goods and services to the poor in ways that are financially sustainable and scalable. If we do that, we really can make poverty history. And it was that whole philosophy that encouraged me to start my current endeavor called Acumen Fund, which is trying to build some mini blueprints for how we might do that in water, health, and housing in Pakistan, India, Kenya, Tanzania, and Egypt. And I want to talk a little bit about that and some of the examples so you can see what it is that we're doing. But before I do this, and this is another one of my pet peeves, I want to talk a little bit about who the poor are, because we too often talk about them as these strong, huge masses of people yearning to be free, when in fact, it's quite a amazing story. On a macro level, 4 billion people on Earth make less than $4 a day. That's who we talk about when we think about the poor. If you aggregated it, it's the 3rd largest economy on Earth, and yet most of these people go invisible. Where we typically work is people making between $1 and $3 a day. Who are these people? They are farmers and factory workers. They work in government offices. They're drivers. They are domestics. They typically pay for critical goods and services like water, like healthcare, like housing, and they pay 30 to 40 times what their middle-class counterparts pay. Certainly where we work in Karachi and Nairobi. The poor also are willing to make and do make smart decisions if you give them that opportunity. So 2 examples. One is in India, where there are 240 million farmers, most of whom make less than $2 a day. Where we work in Aurangabad, the land is extraordinarily parched. You see people on average making 60 cents to $1. This guy in pink is a social entrepreneur named Amitabh. What he did was see what was happening in Israel, larger approaches, and figure out how to drip irrigation, which is a way of bringing water directly to the plant stock. But previously, it's only been created for large-scale farms. So Amitabh took this and modularized it down to an eighth of an acre. A couple of principles: build small, make it infinitely expandable and affordable to the poor. This family, Sarita and her husband, bought a $15 unit when they were living in literally a 3-walled lean-to with a corrugated iron roof. After one harvest, they had increased their income enough to buy a second system to do their full quarter acre. A couple of years later, I meet them. They now make $4 a day, which is pretty much middle class for India, and they showed me the concrete foundation they just laid to build their house. And I swear you could see the future in that woman's eyes, something I truly believe. You can't talk about poverty today without talking about malaria bed nets, and I again give Jeffrey Sachs of Harvard huge kudos for bringing to the world this notion of his rage. For $5, you can save a life. Malaria is a disease that kills 1 to 3 million people a year. 300 to 500 million cases are reported. It's estimated that Africa loses about $13 billion a year to the disease. $5 can save a life. We can send people to the moon. We can see if there's life on Mars. Why can't we get $5 nets to 500 million people? The question, though, is not, why can't we? The question is, how can we help Africans do this for themselves? A lot of hurdles. 1, production is too low. 2, price is too high. 3, this is a good road right near where our factory is located. Distribution is a nightmare, but not impossible. We started by making a $350,000 loan to the largest traditional bed net manufacturer in Africa so that they could transfer technology from Japan and build these long-lasting 5-year nets. Here are just some pictures of the factory. Today, 3 years later, the company has employed another 1,000 women. It contributes about $600,000 in wages to the economy of Tanzania. It's the largest company in Tanzania. The throughput rate right now is 1.5 million nets, 3 million by the end of the year. We hope to have 7 million at the end of next year. So the production side is working. On the distribution side, though, as a world, we have a lot of work to do. Right now, 95% of these nets are being bought by the UN and then given primarily to people around Africa. we're looking at building on some of the most precious resources of Africa, people, they're women. And so I want you to meet Jacqueline, my namesake, 21 years old. If she were born anywhere else but Tanzania, I'm telling you she could run Wall Street. She runs 2 of the lines and has already saved enough money to put a down payment on her house. She makes about $2 a day. Is creating an education fund and told me she is not marrying nor having children until these things are completed. And so when I told her about our idea that maybe we could take a Tupperware model from the United States and find a way for the women themselves to go out and sell these nets to others, she quickly started calculating what she herself could make and signed up. We took a lesson from IDEO, one of our favorite companies, and quickly did a prototyping on this. And took Jacqueline into the area where she lives. She brought 10 of the women with whom she interacts together to see if she could sell these nets $5 a piece, despite the fact that people say nobody will buy one. And we learned a lot about how you sell things, not coming in with our own notions, because she didn't even talk about malaria until the very end. First, she talked about comfort, status, beauty. These nets, she said, you put them on the floor, bugs leave your house. Children can sleep through the night, the house looks beautiful, you hang them in the window, and we've started making curtains. And not only is it beautiful, but people can see status, that you care about your children. Only then did she talk about saving your children's lives. A lot of lessons to be learned in terms of how we sell goods and services to the poor. I want to end just by saying that there's enormous opportunity to make poverty history. To do it right, we have to build business models that matter, that are scalable, and that work with Africans, Indians, people all over the developing world who fit in this category to do it themselves. Because at the end of the day, it's about engagement, it's about understanding that people really don't want handouts, but they want to make their own decisions, they want to solve their own problems, and that by engaging with them, not only do we create much more dignity for them, but for us as well. And so I urge all of you to think next time as to how to engage with this notion and this opportunity that we all have to make poverty history by really becoming part of the process and moving away from an us and them world and realizing that it's about all of us and the kind of world that we together want to live in and share. Thank you.
What if great ideas weren't cherished? What if they carried no importance? Or held no value? There is a place where artistic vision is protected, where inspired design ideas live on to become ultimate driving machines.